Hello again, everyone. Another message from YouTube. This one's another older one from over a year ago, so I'm sorry, I'm just getting to it. I stumbled upon your videos last week, and it's been so hard to tear myself away from listening to them. This past spring, I requested to see a therapist after I began to suffer panic attacks and extreme anxiety after learning that my mother's health had begun to fail. Within several weeks, I dropped 12 pounds, went days without sleeping, and began to feeling terribly ill and emotionally unstable. I fell apart because I was horrified by the realization that deep down I honestly did not care that my mother's health was failing, and I actually felt a sense of relief that I might someday be soon free from her torment and evil ways. All my life I had wondered what's wrong with this woman, but was never given an answer until 2 months ago. My maternal aunts would just say that is how she's always been like this, like she's always been like this. So my siblings and I learned how not to set her off and how to avoid going out with her in public whenever possible. Two things. I used to hear that as well. My sisters used to say that about, my mother's sisters used to say that all about each other. This is how they've always been. But again, it's the guilt over the guilt that you don't feel. Because as a normal, caring human being, you know you're supposed to have compassion. You know you're supposed to care. You've seen other people go through this with family members, and you don't feel like you're actually happy. And then you turn around and you feel like, oh, well, what the hell is wrong with me? You think oh, maybe I am bad. Maybe they were right about me the whole time. And that's not the case. You have every right to feel that way. Sadly, my parents fostered almost 20 children and eventually adopted 4. Oh, okay. Something about foster parents. A lot of them do this. A lot of them are narcissists themselves because they get this narcissistic supply and always a fresh supply of children to screw with. There was a family in my town who had they said they were adopting them, but they weren't actually adopting them. They were fostering them. And then what was later revealed many years later that they were in it just for the money. They were taking all the money they were getting from the state. They weren't spending it on the kids. And they were just really, really ended up being terrible people. So I'm sorry for you for that. But yeah, there is a pretty big contingency of foster parents who are just abusive. And you see it when you see these stories on the news. You know, these kids that get put into foster care and then they end up getting killed by the foster parents in foster care. We were all subjected to her NPD ways and made to feel as though everything that was wrong with our life, in her life, was our fault. Another one. In her eyes, she could do no wrong, was perfect, always right, and absolutely had to be the center of attention. Seeing people happy and smiling would set her off when we would go out in public, so she would instigate arguments with many undeserving individuals. The sickening part was that she treated the children under her care poorly and was verbally abusive. Yet she basked in the praise from outsiders who viewed her as a saint for taking in abandoned kids. Exactly, and that's exactly why they do it. So these people, look at how many kids they're taking, so they must be loving. No, no. This is like an animal hoarder, except they're doing it with children. And it's really sad. The truth was most of us wanted so badly to get the hell away from her. But since the abuse was not physical, you felt foolish for wanting to complain. She constantly reminded my foster and adopted siblings of the faults of their biological parents, and too often would tell them that they too would have ended up as low-life, drug-addicted teenage parents had it not been for her. Oh, this is a great source of supply because you've already, a lot of you feel you've already been abandoned. Your biological parents have so many problems, and they can use that as a tool to just absolutely devastate you. By the time I was 15, I was working one or more jobs to help provide for the things that my mother wanted. We were your average blue-collar, middle-class family, but she always had to have things that were above our means. She stole from my savings account many times, and later when I was in my 20s, I learned that she had helped herself to thousands of dollars in savings bonds that my great-uncle had gifted me over the years for my birthday. My father was a very mild-spoken person who handed over his paycheck to my mother without question. For 40 plus years and agreed to her every demand. There were so many times when I wished he would just divorce her and take us all with him. I never understood how he had the will to put up with her wicked ways for so long. She was so disrespectful to my father, his mother, her children, her siblings, and pretty much everyone she came in contact with. However, when it was time to host a social gathering, she was phenomenal at playing the role of hostess. She lived for being the diva in the room and for being praised for her efforts, much like my family and my grandmother. And this is what they do. They live to be in the spotlight and then abuse you in private. And again, it's another narcissist looking to get their hands on everybody's money, go into people's bank accounts, take your father's paycheck. It's control, 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 control. I now realize that in a way my father was her enabler. Not in a way, he was. But I know if it were not for his presence and the love and acceptance that he offered, I would not be here today. I attempted suicide at the age of 16 as a means of escaping the emotional and psychological trauma I had sustained for so long. Waking up after trying to overdose on pills was such a disappointment. And when I was made to see a therapist, I could never open up about what was bothering me because I knew my mother was on the other side of the door. On the ride home, I was confronted with grand inquisition, so I just learned to shut down and keep my feelings hidden. And this is what abusers do. They bully you, they scare you into silence. I have a deep felt hate and disgust for my mother for so long, but the guilt of feeling that way kept me quiet and from breaking ties with my toxic mother. Instead, I put on a smile, played the role of the attentive daughter, and did my best to maintain peace with my siblings and my mother. Compared to my siblings, she was least abusive with me because I was hers and they were adopted. Almost daily, she would make the distinction that I came from here, pointing to her womb, and they did not. I grew up feeling hated by my mother and hated by my siblings because she always had to draw a line of separation between us because I was her biological child. When her children began to marry, she quickly took to ripping apart the character of our chosen spouses, planting seeds of mistrust and conflict, then would suggest that we leave our spouses with kids in tow and come stay with her over the most insignificant of offenses or disputes within our own marriages. It was truly sickening. She treated us like crap, and we were children under her roof, yet was always looking to sabotage our marriages and drag us back home. That's because she's hoarding you. She likes to hoard children. Your mother is a child hoarder. When she and my father retired and relocated, they splurged on a massive home that she was only able to afford after swindling her mother-in-law out of hundreds of thousands of dollars, sold all my grandmother's homes, and volunteered to care for her last 2 years of life, which she did with much hate and constant NPD-style abuse, but it was a means to getting my grandmother's money. It's always about the money. She also chose to move far away from the rest of our family and their children and childhood friends because she had become jealous of the time my father was spending with his other retired friends, which was not more than 2 or 3 afternoons a week, talking about all times and taking the dog to the park. She was insanely jealous when members of her own family developed strong bonds with friends of their own. So as soon as your mother got what she really wanted, money, then she could leave. Then you didn't need to be under her roof anymore. You can always see what really motivates the narcissist. Despite the fact that it was her choice to move almost 1,000 miles away from her children, she never stopped complaining about the infrequency at which we visited them in their new home. One of her sisters, whom she is in constant competition with, also NPD, retired and relocated a year prior to my mother. But when my aunt moved, all 3 children uprooted their families and followed. This, however, was never going to happen in our own family, and my mother was highly disgusted and disappointed that not one of us wished to live anywhere near her, let alone the single-family basement house basement home she constructed when building her retirement home. Collecting children. And once you can see is you guys were nothing more than pawns with your mom and her sisters. Her kids moved, you have to move. Her kids did this, you have to do this. Okay, you are just nothing more than pawns in the narcissistic game. Since I married, she has never had anything nice to say about my spouse, yet she's always making requests to borrow money from him since she blows through all of her own. The debt she has amassed is astounding, yet she ignores all our past pleas for her to live within her means. For more than 15 years, I had been advising my mother to plan for her elderly years, but instead she pissed away everything. She always joked that she would die in debt and didn't care because once she was dead, it would no longer be her problem. She was also very confident that when needed, I would swoop in and bring her to live with my family. I made it clear that under no circumstances would that ever happen because I could not be around her for more than a few days before her behavior became unbearable. As you would expect, she did not listen, but thankfully she heeded my warning enough to name others as a power of attorney in charge of her health directive as executors of her will. And again, this is something my family went through with my grandmother, because they always are looking for somewhere to live once they blow through all their shit and they got nowhere else to go. For the past 9 years, I have slowly pulled away from my mother, speaking with her only once or twice a week, as opposed to the 4 or 5 daily phone calls she would make. And I arranged for a visit with her only once or twice a year, no more than 4 or 5 days, if that. It has been a blessing to detach from her insane world. I only stuck around for as long as I did to maintain my relationship with my father, whom I adored dearly. When he passed several years back, she didn't even bother to tell us until a week later and had already cremated him. Shortly after he passed, she began expressing great regret for marrying him in the first place, stating that she never really loved him. Until I entered into therapy this past June, I did not know what made this woman tick or how anyone could be so cold, calculating, or willfully oblivious to her own behavior to hurt so many around her. She's not oblivious. She knows exactly what she's doing. Your mother was somebody who went for the best possible deal possible. That's always what it is. She's looking for the best deal to benefit her. When she's not being hateful or self-centered, she's trying to buy your forgiveness. Her whole cycle of bullshit has been draining, and it was not until I became a mother of my own young children that I realized the dysfunction in my own childhood memories. Right, because once you had your own kids, you realize treating children like that is wrong. Your mother wasn't oblivious, because if you know it's wrong, she knows it's wrong, and she made the active, conscious decision to do it anyway for money. She holds on to past transgressions for years, decades even, and swears everyone is stealing from her or plotting against her. Once, because she steals from everybody. So because she steals from everybody, she thinks everybody else must be stealing. Remember, the narcissist is going to project their own bad behavior back on you. Once during a holiday gathering, she could not find her keys and went on a tirade, accusing all her son-in-laws of taking them, yelling that she knew they wanted to sneak in one day and be with friends and rob her. This, of course, insulted everyone. Bags were quickly packed, and that holiday was ruined. Later, she admits that she received a call from her local grocery store informing her she had left her keys at the customer service counter. Our entire childhood was filled with such accusations, insane conspiracy theories, and wackadoodle nonsense. When I found she was sick and felt the immediate impulse to run for the hills, because I knew it would not be long before the flying monkeys, her sisters would swoop in, directing me to prioritize her needs over that of my own family. My mother spent an entire life bringing misery to others and behaving like a spoiled, entirely irresponsible brat. She has lied so much we stopped listening to her tales years ago. Yeah, they want you to do it so they don't, you know. I made the painful decision to go no contact 9 weeks ago. My life has improved immensely just in this short time alone. The guilt was overwhelming at first, but once I closed my Facebook account and changed my phone number, the anxiety caused by trying to avoid dealing with the extended family members subsided. I mailed a very honest no contact letter explaining my reasons and have not looked back. Even though I already live 1,500 miles away, my family and I are set to move to the other side of the world for a few years, and the timing could not be more perfect. Sadly, going no contact has also meant cutting ties with my siblings because they are very easily manipulated by my aunts. Although the one I have always felt closest with jumped ship, went no contact last year when we all first learned of my mother's failing health. Of us all, my mother was most reckless with her, and I hope that my sister receives therapy due to the undue psychological damage inflicted upon her by our NPD mother. Ollie, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for having the courage to make your videos and share your experience. Listening to that taped phone conversation with your mother was like replaying thousands of conversations I had with my own mother. Every family get-together was a platform for one of her outbursts, even during my wedding weekend. It is so sad when your own mother cannot find joy in precious moments such as a child's wedding or the birth of a grandchild. For the latter, I made sure I was not present, and even when I lost a pregnancy, I almost died myself. I did not want her there by my bedside because I knew she would only make it matters worse. No, she would make it about herself, don't you see? Just like she did at your wedding, just like you said earlier, your mother always needs to be the center of attention. So when she's not the center of attention, she lashes out. We're only given one life to live, and it should not be shared with those who only wish to tear you down and break your spirit. My entire life I have felt unworthy and like a failure even when I have succeeded. None of my achievements were good enough in the eyes of my mother, and she would embellish the truth about all of us to tell her friends just to make herself look better. I am sure many will speak ill of me for going no contact and will be completely in shock that I did so, since I've always been the one best equipped with putting up with her antics. But I have cried and have worked through my guilt in therapy and have come to realize that I will no longer give her power in my life. She chose to live her life with bitterness and hatred, and now she will reap what she has sown. I am done. I wish you nothing but peace and joy in your reclaimed life too. T-Pain. Well, thank you for the message. I'm sorry it took me so long to get to it, but again, your mother's narcissism is centered around money and being the center of attention. Okay, I talked about that in the Narcissist Epic Entitlement. The narcissist will steal your spotlight. The narcissist's will is a trap. All these things are things that I've talked about previously on my channel. It's been discussed over and over and over again. But your mother, being the foster mother, was nothing more than a child hoarder. That's it. And you and your sisters and your cousins, your aunt's children, are nothing more than pawns in the narcissist's game of chess. That's all you are, that's all you ever would be, and that's all you ever will be. And that's unfortunate, but at least you've had the insight to go no contact, stay no contact, and smart enough to realize that the enablers, anybody who has contact with her, the enablers needed to go too. So you've definitely done the right thing here. So thank you. Thank you for your message. I really appreciate it. Those of you who are also watching, I'm sure a lot of you can relate. I look forward to seeing some of your comments. And again, if you enjoy this channel and you're getting something from it, please consider donating to the GoFundMe link in the description box. And remember, if you do make a contribution and you want your story read, your story goes right to the top of the list, because I got about 2 years worth of correspondence that I'm going through. So there's going to be a lot of these. So thank you again. Thank you for watching. This is Ollie Matthews. I'll see you all again real soon.